Before we get started with today's podcast, we'd like to ask returning listeners to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you really enjoy it, share a link to this podcast with friends or family who would enjoy hearing our weekly discussions about basketball and basketball culture. Now, on to the show.
Jim, isn't it amazing when Michigan can keep this game to a 19-foot, 9-inch game inside that three-point line? It's all there. Nice move by Steve Fisher here.
Welcome to the 19-9 podcast. On today's episode, we have Josh Swade. Josh is an American documentary filmmaker and author known for directing the 2012 ESPN 30 for 30 documentary, There's No Place Like Home, and writing the corresponding book, The Holy Grail of Hoops, one fan's quest to buy the original rules of basketball. We're going to get into the documentary, his passion for hoops, and the 1988 Kansas team. If you haven't already checked out the Kansas gear on 199.com, what are you waiting for? I've got the practice short, the 1990 game shorts on my wish list already. But let's get started. Josh Barnett, what's going on, man?
What's happening, man?
Josh Swade, how are you?
A lot of Joshes here. I'm good.
I know we got the double Josh. I'll start calling him Barnett from here on out. That's usually what I call him,
that
anyways.
Works.
Well, let's start out here, Josh. I loved just the documentary. Rewatched it. I know you were saying it's been a long time, but you lived it. So I'm just kind of curious, I'm always curious, how something like that begins to come together. Like, it's an idea, but how do you get to a documentary from just your crazy idea? Like, I think that's so cool.
Man, it's kind of a loaded question, but I think some things are just kind of meant to be. And that was one of these situations where, I read about the auction for the rules about 5 or 6 weeks before the auction took place. There was an article in the New York Times, and Sotheby's, I live in New York, and Sotheby's is right around the corner. I mean, it's very close. So what are the chances that, a crazy lunatic Kansas fan lives around the corner from the most famous auction house in the world, and I can just go, literally just pop in and check out this auction that's coming up in 5 weeks time. And so when I went to Sotheby's to just take a look at this display, it just kind of hits you. I mean, it's almost like seeing, the 10 Commandments or something. I mean, it really does jump off the page. Or the pages, I should say. It's more than, was blown away and just thought these things have to be at KU. You could make an argument they should be at the Basketball Hall of Fame. I just felt as a Kansas fan, having lived and experienced and loved Kansas basketball, Allen Fieldhouse, the history of Kansas basketball, there was really only one place for them. And, just kind of took a ragtag crew, worked in television, took a bare bones, the cheapest crew I could put together, and we hit the road and tried to make something happen. And lo and behold, sometimes if you just take that it sounds cliche and corny, and you've heard all these adages in life before, but if you just kind of move it in one direction, things start to happen. And that was an unbelievable example of one thing led to another, led to another, led to another. The next thing you know, auction day, we're in the conference room of a billionaire who's doesn't want to lose. I mean, his competitive juices kicked in and he didn't want to lose. And we didn't really know we were bidding against a Duke alum. We didn't know. We had some hunches to some things, but nobody really knew what was at stake or who we were bidding against. And this guy, David Booth, just is a competitive guy, as a lot of these uber successful people are. And somehow we win. And, when you have an experience like that and you're capturing it on camera, there's going to be some options in terms of where it gets shown. And ESPN, I think, was one of the most natural places to sort of say, hey, we just shot the shit out of this 4-week journey. And they said, holy, we want to we want to be the ones to show it. So that's kind of how it
I
happened.
I was I don't know. I was really obsessed with the documentary, the There's No Place Like Home. But number one, like you can't tell with our backgrounds right now, but our whole studio down here is just like basketball memorabilia. So number one, that stuck out to me. And then number two, your passion really came through, and I was like, holy shit, this guy's just like me. If I knew that the rules of basketball were coming up for sale, like I might have been up there with a group bidding against this dude. You know what I mean? Trying to get him for Indiana or whatever. You know the case may be. But we like the thing that Meyer and I kept talking about was the time frame that you guys put it together in. So I think when the documentary starts, you're at like 27 days or something till auction or something, or maybe 30 days. But it wasn't like you had this like, at least the way the video was set up or it showed, it wasn't like a 6-month run that you had to build all of these assets to get all the ducks in a row. Like this had to be happening, boom, 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 in real time. And so my question was, you got to meet with Roy Williams, you got to meet with Larry Brown, you got to meet with the Booths, and Fog Allen's grandson, and all that stuff. Like, how did that all come together in such a tight timeline?
Yeah, you're right. We only had a month, and it's just one of those things where, like, people who share your love and passion for something, when you approach them, they're down to talk to you. I mean, it sounds crazy that Roy Williams would just open up his office to us and let us come in there and interview him. Here he is coaching North Carolina, but the guy loves and loved his time at KU, and so those kinds of things that and then local news and media in Kansas City was instrumental in helping us spread the word. I went on a couple radio shows, and there was a TV news piece done, and people watch that stuff, especially back then. I think more so than now, or listen to the radio, and that led us to the Allen family. You mentioned Fog Allen's grandson, so it was just a simple kind of local news radio program that got us in with the Allens. You get in with the Allens, I mean, the Indiana equivalent, I guess it'd be the Knights or something like that, or the McCrackens or someone, like it's going to open up some doors there. And the doors kept opening, and we would go in them with all the passion we could.
You can see the exasperation kind of growing each door that opens. You're kind of like, is this going to happen? Because at first it seems like kind of a pipe dream where we're like, I just want to shoot my shot, and even if it doesn't happen, at least I gave it a try with this. But then you get the $1 million pledged there, and it's like it starts to like crystallize a little bit. You're like, man, we might actually, be at least in it.
Yeah, I really love the scene where you call your dad and your dad's like, "Holy shit!" Like I've had that experience with my dad so many times, like growing this company. Because when this company started, we were in my basement, in my house, and nobody really saw what this could eventually be. So now every time I call my parents with like good news of we're launching Kansas tomorrow, or my dad's a big Tennessee fan. Like, Dad, we got Tennessee. His reaction is always like, "Holy shit!" Like, same thing. You know what I mean? So it was funny.
Like the university?
Yeah, right.
You guys know that, like, you're not born loving this stuff. Like, I think it's got to get passed down. Like, to be as crazy as we all are, like, it comes from somewhere, and and so there was definitely like along the way, like, holy shit, like we're getting in, this is moving, like this might be at the very least, like maybe we're actually going to be bidders. Like, just the fact that we could show up on auction day and place any bid felt like a win.
Right.
It didn't have to be the winning bid. And
I also thought it was I thought it was funny as like after you guys did the news thing and you were getting people calling in pledging like $50 and $100, and you could tell how much that like meant to you, because everybody, it's like that shared passion, but then there's also that realization like, man, this is awesome, but that's not going to get it done. Like this, we need a heavy hitter here.
Exactly. You want, you need like people in anything. I'm sure when you're building your business, like people to buy in and say, I see your vision. Like, I'm down for the what you're trying to do here. But at the end of the day, like, they're not going to necessarily get you the Kansas license or get you the Tennessee license. It's you in the trenches trying to get that license, right? So, yeah, it was a tricky deal where, like, at the end of the day, we just needed a David Booth like miracle, or someone like a David Booth, and the guy. I mean, how lucky is Kansas to have? He's kind of like your Mark Cuban, right?
Right. Yeah, I was going to say that.
Who might be coming through for a coach here? And
don't,
Yeah, right.
Meyer, come on, Meyer. That's a different pod. Don't get me
I
excited
know.
on the IU coaching search right now. You know what you're doing over there in that other room. So just stop.
I want to be a part of that pod too.
That's right.
But hey, you honestly, Josh, if you want to be a third co-host, you can come on this thing anytime you
Come
want.
on,
Like I said.
Let's do it, bro.
Hey, I got while I've got you already sidebarred, I'm gonna sidebar the sidebar. How did you get the music for the documentary? Because that took me back to like the 2010s. Because I was like, man, the music budget for this documentary had to be pretty good because you got like the Black Keys on there, and so just it really fits and just is kind of fun way to move the documentary forward.
I would say, like, for that stuff, we definitely like recognized that, like, this was not going to be your typical 30 for 30, which at the time, if you think about what like that series was, it was more or less like look backs at things that had taken place, and this was sort of unfolding as it went along. And in that respect, we really wanted the doc to be quirky, and because it was. I mean, that's what it was inherently, and it just felt like some of those music selections were necessary to make it feel special and different than your typical just kind of talking head documentary. And I will say that there's this great thing that can happen in entertainment in the music business too, where if you pitch managers and publishers and record labels on like why this makes sense and it's art for art's sake and all that shit, they'll listen sometimes. And we did get some people to say, yeah, we see what this is, and we see that this is different, and we know that you don't have a huge budget, but we're down to support what you're trying to do.
The ending scene where you're in the conference room with David Booth, and is it his daughter that was in there too? I believe
it was his wife.
Oh, his wife. Okay, I couldn't remember if it was his wife or daughter. It's been a while, but when you're in there, you're just kind of in the background, and I can see with like every bid, like your stomach is just like churning. Can you describe like what being in that room, but you're in the room, so you're part of it, but you're really not a part of it because it's not your money, but you want this thing so damn bad, and you have no control over it. Can you describe like what that, call it 25 minutes or however long it was, what you were going through?
I think like one great analogy, not to keep like hammering home like the fact that you guys are from Indiana, but like, was it Gordon Hayward who took the shot against Duke that hit the backboard and goes in?
Yeah.
The difference between winning and losing is, it's so small in one respect, but too that in terms of history, it's everything. And I knew in that moment that once it was getting up in the $3 million range and that sort of thing, that like, I didn't want to look, but I could hear he was slowing down. And I was just dying inside because I didn't want to lose.
Yeah.
I didn't want to lose because I knew at that point that second place wasn't good enough.
It was really nice of the Duke guy too to pause for a long time and really make Booth start sweating it out.
He was getting pissed, wasn't he?
He was. I mean, he was pissed off. And who knew that like auction houses allowed that kind of delay? I didn't
right.
know. Like that's a thing. You can just take your sweet ass time. I didn't know that.
Now, what's crazy is you said this was 10 years ago, and I don't know if you're a big collector or not, or if you follow sports memorabilia, but he got that at like 3.4 million, something like that, along that range, and then after the fees and stuff, it went over 4, I think.
Yeah, it was 4.3.
But if that comes up on auction today, I have to imagine that you're in the $10 million range on that shit now.
I mean, I gotta think, if not 20.
I know.
With what's going on. I know baseball cards and that stuff's kind of a different beast or whatever, but there's a lot of Wall Street money in that thing. I would think that this deal would have gone for damn near $20 million.
So really, the booth should thank you for making them buy at such a bargain price.
They really should. I mean, that's the more we got in. I saw the deal way before anyone else. So, no, but we stole it. I think we stole it. I really do.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, hey, I was curious if that, kind of wrapping up here on this, but has your relationship to Kansas changed after the documentary and after all that went down? I know you got to go back. That was so cool, like introducing it, but even going past that time.
Well, if you recall in the film, we had some issues with them because, here I am, some, Joe Schmo off the street running around talking to their wealthiest boosters, right? And that pissed them off. And at the time I understood it. I've always understood that. Like, they don't want that, but at the same time, from my standpoint and perspective, it wasn't about me and it wasn't about them or who the AD was. And there was no AD at the time, which was another issue. It was about forever, And so what I would say is, like, when they hired a new AD and he came in, this guy, Dr. Shayan Zanger, who's no longer the AD there, to his credit, he really understood that this was not me versus the university. None of that stuff. All that mattered was we were preserving and enhancing, the story of Kansas basketball. So I would say that my relationship with the university, first of all, as a basketball fan, nothing changed and nothing will ever change. It remains and always has been, outside of like my two kids, like the most important thing going in my life, As far as like my relationship with the school, we just celebrated the 10-year anniversary. They asked me to write a little something that commemorated the 10 years, and it's great. I got friends there. It's all good. It's all good.
Well, can you take us to a game? That's my follow-up question to that.
You guys haven't been to a game there?
We've not been to Fog Island, man.
Oh, man.
I'm dying. We have a pay heed sign up in the room next to me, too, that hangs over our TV daily that I look at every day and know that I have to get to Fog Island Fieldhouse, but awesome. It hadn't happened yet. And we were going to do it this year, and obviously this year was a little bit different, so hopefully next year.
I would love to go to a game with you guys and show you everything there is to show you. It's a great town.
That'd be awesome.
I've never been to Assembly Hall either, so we can.
Oh, there we go. Home and home.
There you go.
Let's make it happen.
I'd love that. That'd be amazing.
Okay, so our emphasis in Hardwood Heaven, our thing that we have going right now during the Final Four when this airs, like I was talking to you about, it's just this basketball utopia that we created, and obviously we created it using some of our current licenses and bringing out and telling the best stories in college basketball with the schools that we have licensed in our product. And one of the schools that we chose was obviously Kansas, who has a great tradition. And then we did a focus and emphasis on the 1988 Danny and the Miracles team. So we're bringing out their shorts. The shorts are available for purchase now if you're listening to this, or will be when this airs. And I wanted to know kind of where that 88 team ranks on your personal list of all-time KU teams, or if you had any recollection or memories of the team growing up. You were probably decently young, but probably enough to remember some of it. So anything from the 88 season that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I was 13, so I remember
Wheelhouse.
Everything. I remember a lot.
That's perfect.
And, Danny decided to come back to school, right? So that was a big deal. And I think there was a lot of optimism entering the season. And there were always rumors about Larry Brown leaving. That was the nature of Larry Brown even in 1987 going into 88. And the fact that we had both those guys returning, there was a big, a lot of reason to be optimistic. And then the season really just kind of unraveled. I mean, the team struggled. And at one point, I think it looked like this wasn't even going to be an NCAA tournament team. And, famously, Duke came into our building. In fact, that's the game the guys first put the Payheed banner up for. The Payheed banner is very central to this season. And so the guys put the banner up for the Duke game. It was a big game because it was towards the end of the season. It was a chance to kind of get a big win. Duke was ranked top 10 team, and we blew a lead. Game goes to overtime, and we lose in overtime. And it looked like that might be the nail in the coffin on the year, but we turned it around shortly thereafter, won the next few games, and ended up, if I'm not mistaken, getting a 6 seed to go into the tournament. And, whenever you got the best player on any court, in any game you're going to play, you have a shot, right?
You got a shot, exactly.
You got a shot. And so we knew we always, Oklahoma, that Oklahoma team, I mean, it was kind of
really
like
good.
Good team.
Right? Like, Stacey King, Mookie Blaylock.
Billy Tubbs is always underrated, too. Like, he doesn't get brought up anymore, but Billy Tubbs was like a legend.
That's that thing about winning and losing, right? Like, he wins that game. All of a sudden, we think of Billy Tubbs in a very different way, but
completely different.
He was.
But it's funny. It's funny in what we do when we research and get to bring back. Like we did Louisville a few weeks ago. Denny Crum's another guy that doesn't get the probably the credit that he deserves. And he won too. You know what I mean? It's like it's just why it's so fickle how that shit plays out.
It really is.
I think personality though too. Denny Crum's such a level-headed guy. Watching the Louisville documentary, he doesn't cuss ever. Just not bombastic in the way that
Billy Tubbs was fiery though, man. Like he left a mark.
Yeah. He had that tight comb over.
Sure did. Sure did.
He was kind of a slick hillbilly kind of thing, right? But yeah, we had the best player in the country. And what's crazy about that tournament is we had lost 3 home games that year outside of the Duke game. Including the Duke game. We had lost at home to Kansas State, Duke, and Oklahoma. Those were our 3 home losses. We beat all 3 of those teams to win the national championship.
Yeah, like a redemption tour. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. But I mean, who would have thought that team had no business even, playing for and then winning a title. You're wearing a hat commemorating 50 years of the NCAA tournament. It took place in Kansas City.
The setting, I was getting ready to hit on that like Kemper Arena or whatever, and then you had 2 Big 12 teams playing in Kansas City. Like the atmosphere on that, I just watched that game not too long ago on YouTube, I think, and the atmosphere of that game was like high level. Like you could feel the energy even now, and that shit 30 years ago,
And back then it was the Big 8, right? Like it wasn't the Big 12.
Yeah, Big 8. That's right.
Did you get to go to any of the games?
Well, the crazy thing is, I always give my dad a hard time because I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and he wasn't about to shell out the money necessary to go to that game. I mean, Kemper, I don't know what it held, or
it's not that big. I grew up playing Pee Wee soccer in there actually.
Did you really?
Yeah.
And so he wasn't going to start. We watch a game at home is what I'm getting at, and I still give him a hard time. Like how do we not go to that Final Four and that national? But at the same time, what it did for me is now in my life now, if I got a shot and I can figure out a way to get to a final, if Kansas is playing in the Final Four, you better believe I'm trying to get there. So I'm kind of living the life in response to the fact that we didn't go to that Final Four.
Yeah.
Because I will fucking buy the cheapest ticket anybody's selling and just sneak down. I'll figure out a way.
Sure, absolutely. 100%.
All I'm worried about is me, but I got my brother. Yeah. But my brother's right there with me, so we figured it out. Yeah.
It is funny, like my dad too, like we grew up loving sports, and my number one sports memory is why I was 8-7 when IU won their last natty, as embarrassing as that is for us to admit. But I remember the whole scene of being in the hotel in Indy because he was traveling for work, but we all got together up there, and like it's still my favorite sports memory. But we didn't go to shit, like never went to anything. You know what I mean? It's like I do the same thing now with my son. You know, COVID year, but with my son, I'm like, we're gonna try to go to a few things just so we can do that stuff. You know, like there's no reason not to.
And Josh, it's not a knock on your dad, right? Like it was
no, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
And he passed down the most important thing, which is the love, you know?
Sometimes I think that's a curse, though, too, if you're an IU fan and a Tennessee football fan like I am. Like, it's been a long 15, 20 years, brother.
Totally. But for me, too, it's a blessing. It's also a curse. But it's more of a blessing.
For sure.
It is a curse. It's a curse because, you know, look, I know you guys have been through tough times, way tougher than we have. But, you know, the Kansas story is pretty full of peaks and valleys. I mean, it really is. It's not an easy fandom. It really is. From the outside looking in, I think people can think that sometimes because there's a level of consistency there. But we've had some fucking choke jobs. I mean, I think to the outsider looking in, like conference titles, whatever, I don't know what, you know, but it's been painful, very painful.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've always been amazed with Kansas resiliency though. Kansas, Carolina, Kentucky, I think are the three blue bloods that don't stay down long. So if they are down, they'll make the moves to get it right to get back up. And I think it's really tough. Like you guys have replaced legends. Carolina has replaced legends. Kentucky has replaced legends. That's not an easy thing to do. And there might be a dip for a few years, but you guys, those three programs always seem to find their footing where others toil in mediocrity for 20 years. You know, I think it's just an amazing thing that Kansas has done, honestly.
Yeah, you know, people, the blue blood discussion, I know there's a million ways to slice that. I do think you're right. You know, without sounding too much like a homer, I think that the most undervalued stat is winning percentage. I think winning percentage tells the biggest story. It doesn't tell the story about national championships necessarily or even Final Four or any of that, but it tells like the story, right? Mm-hmm. And those three programs, if I'm not mistaken, maybe Duke's up there, I'm pretty sure the only ones to win over 70% of their games.
And Duke's going to be fascinating to watch once K leaves because you don't know which category they fit in right now. Right now they have their Bob Knight on steroids. You know what I mean? We had our Knight for 30 years, and it was like once he left, it was like, okay, was that Indiana basketball or was that just Bob Knight basketball? Because we haven't been able to replicate. You know, it's like it's going to be fascinating to me to see how Duke replaces K, Michigan State replaces Izzo, and Syracuse replaces Boeheim because all that stuff's coming. And even Roy too at UNC getting replaced. It's going to be very interesting to see what those schools are able to do in that hiring of a successor to a legend.
100%. You can't undervalue, in my opinion, luck. Luck plays a part in this, sure. Right? Like you could like Kelvin Sampson getting hired from Oklahoma. You know, we faced Kelvin Sampson for a decade when he was at OU. Guy's look what he's doing at Houston.
I love Kelvin Sampson.
Kelvin Sampson's a great basketball coach.
That was my guy, man.
He was a great hire at IU.
Yep.
What went down there is kind of a bunch of bullshit, you know?
Bullshit. It's not even illegal now.
Right, and like
it wasn't illegal the next year.
So that's
exactly.
Bad luck. My point is, it's bad luck. It's not an IU, you know. Like we can sometimes, I think, make a bigger deal out of things when it can sometimes just be bad luck.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, I agree. 100%. Well, the national championship runs too. The national championship runs hang in the balance of one play like. IU never wins in 87 if Nikita Wilson from LSU hits that fadeaway jump shot in the regional final. they never get a shot at. It's just so much little stupid stuff. If Keith Smart doesn't make that shot, Jim Boeheim has 2 national championships. Like,
Really?
you just don't. It's impossible to quantify the luck aspect of it.
For sure. I mean, didn't we? If I'm not mistaken, Kansas lost to Indiana in a title game by a point or something like that.
Yeah, that was back before our time.
Oh, that was way before our time. But the point being, like, it's a basket,
Yeah.
It's one
Yeah.
basket,
No, that's exactly
you know?
it. That's exactly it. So back to your original question, where's 87 or 88? I'm sorry, rank on your all-time Kansas teams, personally. Not that they're the best, just you personally as a fan.
I'd say it's number one. It's number one for me because it's my favorite Jayhawk of all time, Danny Manning. It's Larry Brown, who even though Ted Owens is an underrated coach and went to 2 Final Fours, Larry kind of like really put us on this trajectory, and it was so Cinderella-esque. It's in Kansas City, my hometown. How could that not pay heed banner? I mean, it's a special year. So for me, and I was just coming into like loving it as a kid. So that's number one.
I love it. I think that team's so fun that you get a little bit of the underdog in there too. There's something about even the last time we went to the Final Four, that 2002 team, being able to watch a team that's underseeded or has to upset people get there. There's just something special about the excitement that brings out, because it's unexpected and you don't feel that same pressure either. You're like, well, if we lose, we've had a great run, right? And then you guys just kept going all the way, which is incredible.
Wild, just wild.
Yeah, what's a favorite game you've ever seen at the Fog?
That's a great question. Wow. Man, I mean, there's been so many. In fact, Jacques Vaughn, I hate to do this to you guys, but there's a game we beat y'all.
Yeah,
Jacques Vaughn
Kansas
hit
had
a
our number.
three. You remember that? Do you guys recall
Jacques
this game?
Vaughn was awesome. I loved
He
watching
hit a
Jacques
three.
Vaughn was awesome.
Yeah.
He hit a 3. I believe it was in overtime to beat you
Ostertag on
guys.
that team too.
Ostertag was on
the-
that team.
The Ostertag team beat our ass in the tournament, like beat the shit out of us, like by 30.
Then 91 or something like that.
Yeah,
93?
it was in that range where we had a really good team, and Kansas came in. Like I don't think I've ever seen my dad so deflated in my time in my entire life.
Wow. The years get cloudy. So that I'll never forget Vaughn hitting that 3 to beat IU. Keith Langford in overtime against Georgia Tech on New Year's Day. I was at the
Silky
game.
smooth lefty. I loved him. Slasher, man.
I love.
He could
love
go.
K Freeze. What are some other great ones? I mean, there's been so many. Collison and Heinrich. I mean, we beat Texas in a back and forth, just unbelievable game. Collison. Dick Vitale sort of stood up and gave him a standing ovation. It was.
I remember that. It was like 33 points, 20 rebounds, something crazy like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. I was at that game. There's just a bunch. I was not at. There's the famous final Kansas-Missouri game. Is a game that it was also an overtime game, and that's such a rivalry game.
Can we get that back?
It's coming back. It was supposed to come back this year.
Oh, nice.
Back. Yeah, it's coming back.
Are they doing it home and home, or do they do it on neutral court?
They're doing it in Kansas City on a neutral court.
Okay. That'll still be fun, man.
It'll be a good time, but it's not the same. They should go home and home.
I heard a funny story about Nick Collison yesterday that he showed up to play like pickup ball in New York City somewhere and starts splashing threes because, of course, he's Nick Collison. He can shoot too. And the guy asked him if he played high school basketball anywhere.
That's pretty funny.
We were watching the tournament today, and it was like 2 lower seeds or something, and we're just sitting there watching it. And I said to the guys down here, I'm like, can you imagine any of these dudes on the court right now showing up at a rec league? I was like, they would be an absolute fucking nightmare. Any of them, just pick any of them. It doesn't matter who.
If you're playing division, just the speed alone, like there's such a drastic difference between rec league guys and Division I guy. I mean,
I know.
it'll blow you away, even if they can't shoot.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. They're like the top 1% of the top 1% body types in the world. Like, they're going to destroy you. It doesn't matter.
You don't stand a chance. You don't.
Well, okay, so our theme, Josh, is Hardwood Heaven, where I was kind of telling you that we pieced all these different collection of stories together and teams that we wanted to tell through the lens of who we have the license for. But it's basically 99's basketball utopia through our licensed apparel and stuff in the schools that we have. If you go to basketball heaven, your basketball utopia, who's the first person that you're seeking out to sit down and talk with and just chop it up hoops wise?
I think the most obvious answer to that should be probably Fog Allen. But for me personally, it's actually not Fog, it's Red Auerbach. And it's just everything we know about Red Auerbach, what he meant to the game, the way in which he, came from the streets of Brooklyn. There's something I love about that, and was such a self-made guy. Was colorblind. If I'm not mistaken, was the first guy to start an entire black roster in the NBA. Had this unbelievable relationship with,
Russell.
the great Bill Russell. It made Russell a player coach. Russell was a coach, as you know, won all these titles, greatest winning percentage. He was a guy that for me was everywhere all the time. Read all the Feinstein books about him and his love of Chinese food. He just was so into the cigar. I love him as a character.
The most arrogant shit of all time. Like, amazing.
Just the GOAT. He's the GOAT for me. And
Right.
I'm not even an NBA guy. But I am a tradition guy. I love like East Coast personality, swagger. So it checks a lot of boxes for me.
He brings it back to college too. I don't know if you've read the John Thompson autobiography yet, but he had a huge influence on John Thompson's life because Thompson plays on those Celtics teams and just gets mentored basically by Auerbach. So that's kind of him passing it back down to the college ranks. And he just was one of those guys, like some of the 5-star guys that seem to touch every corner of basketball, even though he was in the NBA,
And did you guys ever see that incredible? It was actually an ESPN 30 for 30 short on Wilt Chamberlain.
As a bellhop.
The Borscht bellhop.
Fucking insane.
Right? It turns out Auerbach, he was all up in that. He was like the director of entertainment or something at Kutsher's back in. This guy was everywhere.
Everywhere.
Literally
There's some great stories in that book that Meyer mentioned. We're actually going to have Jesse Washington on the pod next week too to discuss it more. But there's some great Red Auerbach stories because it's so funny because the NBA recruited regionally there. So if a guy went to college in your region, then you had first rights to draft them. So with John Thompson in Providence, Red Auerbach would just pick him up in his car and they would drive down to some basketball camp or something and just shoot the shit as a college kid. And he might have even met him in high school too and stuff. It's just crazy. You're like, God damn, how does Red Auerbach know everybody? How does that work?
I think about John Thompson. And John, we think about what John Thompson means to these coaches today, and rightfully so. The guy was an unbelievable coach, trailblazer, human being. At the 1988 Final Four, I remember my dad didn't take me to the Final Four, but he took me to there's all the hoopla
Fan Fest or something.
Fan Fest. But at the time, he took me to the coach's hotel. I went up to John Thompson to get his autograph, and he sits there, he's talking to someone else. He puts his arm around me, and it was very much like, all right, I got to wait till he's done talking. I sat there for what felt like forever. It was probably a good 5 minutes.
Yeah.
He had his arm around me. And then finally he finishes talking, talks to me, signs the autograph. You know, my dad takes a picture. I mean, that was the kind of guy John Thompson was. And I didn't even know that about Red Auerbach and him.
All right, last question then. I just want to find out like what you're into next. You know, I always want to hear what you can tell us or what you've been working on or anything you can share about what kind of stories you're going to tell, because that's what gets me excited, is that it never ends, right? There's just so many stories to tell, big and small, when it comes to basketball.
In terms of basketball, you know, I don't necessarily have something that I'm doing basketball related right now.
Or sports is sports. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, I'm hesitant to say on the sports side, it's real good. I'll
Nice.
tell you guys off the air.
Okay.
But it's I can't let it leak yet.
That's cool.
But I'll tell you off the air.
What do you have outside of sports? What do you have going on? What is there anything that you want to promote out that you guys have that's coming that you're excited for?
I mentioned Auerbach because I love big East Coast personalities and that sort of thing. I have a film coming out this year on a infamous New York City hip hop photographer named Ricky Powell. And his claim to fame was he was kind of like the fourth Beastie Boy.
Nice.
And he sadly passed away about 6 weeks ago. And the film is going to premiere at the Tribeca Film Fest here in New York.
Oh, nice.
And,
Congrats.
You know, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's going to, be shown in a very big way on a network we all know and love soon thereafter. And I'm super pumped about that. That's
awesome.
It's kind of got that same energy that No Place Like Home had, you know? But it's like music and style and culture and all that kind of shit. So, yeah.
Perfect. You have to come
It's
back
always-
on, dude. Music back.
Yeah, for
I love
sure.
it.
It's always amazing to me how intertwined basketball and hip hop are too. Like it's just like this perfect symmetry between the two, and they like grew up together. It's just a amazing thing. So, Josh, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on. I know we took you away from some March Madness games. We took ourselves away too because our internet down here sucks so bad. We have to turn all the TVs off when we do this. So we all want to get back to see what the scores are and what's going on. But we can't thank you enough, man. Thank you for taking the time.
And I'm loving what y'all are doing. Seriously, like, what a smart, like, unbelievable business you guys have, and like, the shorts look unbelievable. So thanks for having me.
Well, we
and
really appreciate it, man.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the kind words too. And hopefully we'll have you back on here before too long. You can pump whatever project you have going on, and we love all of it. So thanks again.
Thank you for listening to the 19-9 podcast. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, make sure you do. And while you're there, leave us a rating and review. 5 stars like the basketball camp. We also have links to all of 19-9's social media so you never miss a release. Until next time.